There's a kind of pain that doesn't leave scars on your skin. It lives deeper. It reshapes the architecture of who you are. And most people spend their entire lives running from it, never realizing it's the only thing that can set them free. You've felt it, haven't you? That strange, persistent ache that shows up in the middle of ordinary days. You're sitting in traffic, or folding laundry, or scrolling through your phone, and suddenly there it is. A heaviness in your chest, a question without words, a longing for something you can't quite name. It's not sadness, exactly. It's more like a quiet erosion. As if some invisible river has been carving through you for years, wearing away the ground you thought was solid. You tell yourself you're fine, you keep moving. But late at night, when the world goes quiet, you feel the hollow space where something used to be. Most of us carry wounds we don't talk about, not because we're ashamed, but because we don't have the language for them. They're not the dramatic kind, the kind that make for compelling stories at dinner parties. They're subtler. The wound of never feeling quite enough. The wound of being misunderstood by the people who were supposed to know you. The wound of watching your younger self's dreams dissolve into the compromises of adulthood. These aren't just memories. They're living presences inside you. They change how you walk through the world. They make you flinch when someone gets too close. They make you build walls so high you forget there was ever anything on the other side worth reaching for. And here's what nobody tells you. Those wounds aren't accidents. They're not random cruelties inflicted by an indifferent universe. They're invitations, doorways. Cracks in the false self you've been building since childhood, the version of you that learned to smile when you were breaking, to stay quiet when you needed to scream, to keep performing even when you forgot what you were performing for. Pain is how the soul gets your attention. Think about it. When did you last really change? Not surface, level change, new haircut, new job, new city. Deep change. The kind that alters the gravitational field of your entire existence. It wasn't during the easy times, was it? It wasn't when everything was comfortable and predictable. It was when something broke open inside you. When loss stripped you down to your raw humanity. When disappointment shattered the story you'd been telling yourself about how life was supposed to go. That breaking, that's not the end. That's the beginning. There's an old Sufi teaching that says the wound is where the light enters. Not despite the wound, through it, because of it. The crack in your heart isn't a defect to be hidden or healed as quickly as possible. It's an opening. A way for something truer, something deeper, to finally reach you. But we've been taught the opposite, haven't we? We live in a culture that treats pain like a problem to be solved, an inconvenience to be medicated away, a weakness to be overcome through positive thinking and productivity hacks. We're told that if we're suffering, we're doing something wrong. That happiness is the natural state, and anything else is a deviation that needs to be corrected. So we numb, we distract, we scroll and shop and binge and busy ourselves into oblivion. We pile pleasure on top of pain, hoping the weight of one will crush the other. We optimize and upgrade and improve, always chasing some future version of ourselves who will finally be immune to hurt. And in that frantic running, we miss the most important thing. Pain is not the problem. Avoidance is. Because every time you turn away from your pain, you turn away from yourself. Every time you refuse to feel what's actually happening inside you, you abandon the part of you that needs you most. You become a stranger to your own soul. You start living on the surface of your life, never dipping below the waterline where the real depths are. Core insight to wisdom. This is the paradox at the heart of being human. The very thing you're afraid will destroy you is the thing that will transform you. Not because pain is good or noble or something to be glorified, but because pain is honest. It doesn't lie. It doesn't perform. It strips away all the pretense and shows you what's actually there. When you're in pain, you can't hide behind your accomplishments. Your impressive resume doesn't comfort you at 3 in the morning when grief is sitting on your chest like a stone. Your social media following doesn't hold you when loneliness wraps its cold fingers around your throat. Your carefully curated image means nothing when you're face to face with the raw, unedited truth of your existence. Pain is the great equalizer, the great clarifier. It reveals what matters and what doesn't. It shows you who stays and who leaves. It teaches you which parts of your identity were borrowed costumes and which parts are bone deep truth. And here's what most people never realize: the soul doesn't grow in comfort. It grows in friction, in tension, in the crushing pressure of circumstances that force you to either expand or collapse. Like a seed that must break open in darkness before it can reach toward light. Like metal that must pass through fire before it becomes a blade. Your pain is not meaningless. It's not punishment. It's not evidence that you've failed at life or that the universe is against you. It's the curriculum, the initiation, the sacred work of becoming who you actually are beneath all the layers of who you thought you had to be. Every spiritual tradition understands this. The mystics didn't transcend suffering by avoiding it. They walked straight into it, eyes open, hearts willing. They let it unmake them, and in that unmaking, they found something the comfortable world can never touch: a depth of presence, a quality of aliveness, a connection to the eternal that only exists on the other side of surrender. You've been wearing a mask so long, you forgot it wasn't your face. But pain has a way of showing you the difference. The illusion we build. From the moment you were born, you've been learning how to be acceptable, how to earn love, how to be safe in a world that felt too big and too dangerous. You watched the adults around you, and you learned the rules spoken and unspoken. Be good, be useful, be impressive, be whatever keeps you from being abandoned. So you built a self, not your real self, the one that existed before anyone told you who to be, but a working model, a performance, a carefully constructed persona designed to navigate the world without getting too hurt. And it worked for a while. That false self got you through school, through relationships, through job interviews and family dinners. It knew what to say and when to say it. It knew how to smile when it needed to, how to hide what was too messy or complicated or raw. But here's the problem: the false self can't feel joy. Not real joy. It can feel satisfaction, the temporary high of approval, achievement, external validation. But it can't feel the deep, sourceless joy that comes from simply being alive, because it's too busy performing to just be. The false self is exhausted. It's running on fumes, powered by anxiety and the constant fear of being exposed as not enough. It needs the world to keep applauding, keep approving, keep confirming that the mask is convincing. And when that validation stops, when you lose the job, the relationship, the identity you'd wrapped around yourself like armor, the false self starts to crumble. That crumbling feels like death, because in a way, it's the death of the person you thought you had to be. The death of the story you'd been telling yourself about who you are and what your life means. The dark night of the soul. There's a phrase for this in the mystical traditions. The dark night of the soul. It's the period when everything that gave your life meaning suddenly seems hollow. When the structures you'd built your existence around collapse. When you look at your life from the outside and can barely recognize it as yours. Nothing makes sense anymore. The goals that used to motivate you feel pointless. The relationships that used to sustain you feel and transactional. You go through the motions because you don't know what else to do, but inside there's a vast emptiness, a silence, a void where your sense of self used to be. Most people panic at this stage. They try to rebuild the old self as quickly as possible. They grab onto new identities, new distractions, new projects, anything to fill the emptiness and restore the familiar sense of who they are. Because the void is terrifying. It feels like annihilation, like falling through space with nothing to catch you. But here's what the mystics knew: the void is not the end. It's the clearing. It's the necessary destruction of everything false so that something true can finally emerge. You can't build a new self on top of the old one. You have to let the old one die, completely, irrevocably. You have to stop trying to save it, stop trying to go back to who you were before the pain came. Because that person is gone. And holding on to their ghost will only keep you trapped in a life that no longer fits. The wisdom in letting go, this is where the real work begins. Not the work of becoming someone better, more enlightened, more spiritually advanced, but the work of simply being with what is, of allowing yourself to exist in the uncertainty without rushing to resolve it, of sitting in the darkness without immediately reaching for a light switch. It's counterintuitive. Every instinct in you wants to fix this, solve this, make this uncomfortable feeling go away. But what if you didn't? What if you just stayed? What if you let yourself feel the full weight of not knowing who you are anymore? There's a strange liberation in that surrender. When you stop trying to be anyone, you discover you already are someone. Not the constructed self, not the performance, but something quieter, simpler, more fundamental. The awareness that's been watching this whole time. The consciousness that exists before and beneath all the stories you tell about yourself. The Buddhists call it your original face, the one you had before your parents were born. The self that isn't defined by your achievements or failures, your past or your future, your roles or your relationships. The self that simply is. And here's the profound truth, that self doesn't need to be protected. It can't be destroyed by pain or failure or loss. It's not fragile. It's not performing. It's not trying to earn its right to exist. It just is, the way the sky just is, the way the ocean just is, vast, impersonal, untroubled by the storms that move across its surface. The transformation, this is what pain does when you stop running from it. It strips away everything that isn't essential. It burns through the false self like fire through dead wood. And what remains isn't a different person. It's you, but more you than you've ever been. More honest, more present, more alive. You start to notice things you were too busy to see before. The way light falls through a window, the sound of your own breathing, the miracle of being conscious, here, now, in this brief and improbable moment of existence. Things that used to seem mundane suddenly shimmer with significance, not because they've changed, but because you have. Your relationships shift. The ones built on pretense and performance start to feel uncomfortable, like clothes that don't fit anymore. And the ones built on genuine connection deepen in ways you didn't know were possible. Because you're finally showing up as yourself, not as who you think you should be. And that authenticity creates permission for others to do the same. You discover a kind of fearlessness you didn't have before. Not the fearlessness of someone who's never been hurt, but the fearlessness of someone who's been broken and survived. You know now that you can lose everything and still be okay. Because the thing you were most afraid of falling apart already happened, and you're still here. The pain that broke you also freed you. What if the thing you've been calling your worst experience is actually your greatest teacher? What if nothing was ever wasted? The meaning we make, here's what nobody tells you about pain. It's not what happens to you that determines your life. It's what you make of what happens. Two people can go through the same trauma and emerge as completely different humans. One becomes bitter, closed, a walking wound that never heals. The other becomes compassionate, open, a source of light for everyone they meet. The difference isn't in the severity of the pain. It's in the relationship to it. When you resist your pain, fight it, resent it, treat it like an enemy that shouldn't exist, it hardens inside you. It becomes a scar that never quite heals. A story you tell yourself about how life wronged you, a reason to stay small and afraid. The pain doesn't go away through resistance. It just goes underground, where it poisons everything quietly, slowly, invisibly. But when you turn toward your pain, when you allow it, feel it, let it move through you without judgment, something alchemical happens. The pain doesn't disappear, but it transforms. It becomes wisdom, depth, empathy. The very thing that could have destroyed you becomes the foundation of your strength. This is the alchemy the ancient mystics spoke of, turning lead into gold, darkness into light, not by denying the darkness, but by bringing consciousness to it, by sitting with it long enough that it reveals its hidden gifts. The gifts hidden in wounds. Every wound carries a teaching. The wound of abandonment teaches you to find the home inside yourself that can never be taken away. The wound of betrayal teaches you discernment, how to see people clearly, including yourself. The wound of failure teaches you that your worth isn't tied to your performance. The wound of loss teaches you to love what's here while it's here, without grasping, without guarantees. These aren't consolation prizes. They're not silver linings you paste over tragedy to make yourself feel better. They're real, earned wisdom that only exists on the other side of genuine suffering. Think about the people who've most impacted your life. The ones whose presence feels like permission to be real, to be human, to be imperfect. Chances are, they're not the people who've had it easy. They're the ones who've been through something. The ones who've stared into their own darkness and come back with their eyes open, and their hearts still soft. That's the mark of transformed pain, not bitterness, not hardness, not the need to make everyone else hurt as much as you do, but a kind of tender strength, a groundedness, an ability to hold space for others' suffering because you've learned to hold space for your own. The practice of presence. So how do you actually do this? How do you transform pain instead of just surviving it? It starts with presence, with being willing to feel what you're feeling without immediately trying to change it. This is harder than it sounds. We're so conditioned to fix, solve, resolve, move on. The idea of just being with discomfort, without a plan or an exit strategy, feels almost transgressive. But this is the practice. When grief rises, you don't push it down or distract yourself or force yourself to be grateful instead. You let it be there. You feel it in your body, the tightness in your chest, the ache in your throat, the heaviness in your limbs. You breathe into it. You make room for it. You say to yourself, this is here. This is what it feels like to be human right now. I don't have to like it, but I can allow it. This isn't passive resignation. It's active acceptance. There's a difference. Resignation says, I'm powerless. Nothing will ever change. Acceptance says, this is what's true right now, and I'm strong enough to hold it. And something strange happens when you do this consistently. The pain you were so afraid of becomes less overwhelming. Not because it goes away, but because you discover you're bigger than it. Your capacity to hold difficult emotions expands. You realize you can feel grief and still function. You can acknowledge fear without being controlled by it. You can sit with loneliness without needing to fill it immediately with noise. The compassion that emerges as you develop this relationship with your own pain, something else begins to shift: your relationship with everyone else's pain. You start to see suffering everywhere, not in a depressing way, but in a way that connects you to the shared human experience. The stranger who snapped at you in line isn't just rude, they're carrying something heavy you can't see. The family member who keeps disappointing you isn't just thoughtless, they're fighting battles you know nothing about. The colleague who seems to have it all together is probably holding themselves together with threads you can't perceive. This recognition doesn't make you a pushover. It doesn't mean you tolerate mistreatment or abandon your boundaries. But it does make you less reactive, less quick to judge, less certain that you understand the full story of anyone's life, including your own. Real compassion isn't a feeling. It's not about feeling sorry for people or being nice. It's about recognizing the common ground of vulnerability, the fact that every single person you've ever met is doing their best with what they have, which is sometimes not much. It's about seeing yourself in everyone and everyone in yourself. This is what your pain can teach you if you let it. Not to be a victim, not to be special or broken or beyond help, but to be human. Fully, courageously, unapologetically human, with all the mess and beauty and contradiction that entails. The choice point right now, in this moment, you have a choice. You can keep treating your pain like something that shouldn't have happened, something that makes you damaged or unlucky or cursed. You can keep waiting for the day when you finally feel healed enough to start living, or you can recognize that this right here, right now, with all your scars and unresolved grief and lingering questions, this is life. This is it. And it's enough. You're enough. Not despite what you've been through, but including it. Because of it. The pain that shapes your soul isn't making you less. It's making you more. More real. More present. More able to love and be loved, not perfectly, but authentically. You've been broken. You've been remade. Now comes the most important question: who are you becoming? The emergence of the true self. There's a moment that comes after the breaking, after the dark night, after you've sat with your pain long enough that it's taught you its secrets. A moment when you wake up and realize you're not the same person who entered this fire. You've been fundamentally altered. Not damaged, changed, deepened. Expanded into a version of yourself you couldn't have accessed any other way. This new self isn't the false self you constructed as a child. It's not the performance you maintained to keep yourself safe. It's something altogether different. Something that feels both entirely new and strangely familiar, like coming home after a long exile. The ancient Greeks had a concept called eudaimonia, often translated as flourishing or living in accordance with your highest nature. Not happiness in the shallow temporary sense, but a deep alignment between who you are and how you live. A sense of rightness that exists independent of circumstances. This is what becomes possible after transformation. Not because you've transcended suffering or achieved some permanent state of bliss, but because you've stopped betraying yourself. You've stopped trying to be someone you're not. You've made peace with your humanity, the light and the shadow, the strength and the fragility, the wisdom and the woundedness. Living from depth, when you live from this place, everything changes. Not the external circumstances of your life, necessarily, though sometimes those change too, but the quality of your presence. The way you meet each moment. You stop living on autopilot, sleepwalking through your days, waiting for life to start being what you thought it should be. You show up. You pay attention. You notice the texture of your experience, the taste of your morning coffee, the weight of your breath, the sound of rain against the window. These small, ordinary moments stop being so ordinary. They become sacred. Not because you're forcing some spiritual interpretation onto them, but because you're finally actually here for them, present, awake. No longer somewhere else in your mind, rehearsing conversations that haven't happened or replaying ones that have. This is what all the meditation teachers and spiritual texts are pointing toward when they talk about presence. Not some elevated state you achieve after years of practice. Just this. Just being fully where you are, experiencing what you're experiencing, without the constant narration and judgment and planning that usually occupies your consciousness. Your pain taught you this. By forcing you to stop and feel, to slow down and pay attention, to let go of control and surrender to what is. It cracked you open to the present moment in a way that comfort never could. The courage to be authentic. And from this presence comes something else, the courage to be authentic. To say what you actually think instead of what you think people want to hear. To express what you actually feel instead of performing the emotions you believe are appropriate. To live according to your values, even when it costs you approval or comfort or security. This isn't recklessness. It's not about oversharing or being deliberately provocative or using or authenticity as an excuse to be unkind. It's about integrity. about the inner alignment that comes from not betraying yourself in small ways every single day. Because that's what we do, isn't it? We betray ourselves constantly. We say yes when we mean no. We laugh at jokes that aren't funny. We stay in situations that suffocate us because leaving feels too hard, too complicated, too uncertain. We dim our light so others won't feel uncomfortable in their darkness. And each small betrayal costs us. Not dramatically, but cumulatively, like water wearing away stone, until one day we look at our lives and barely recognize them. Until we realize we've been living someone else's version of success, someone else's idea of happiness, someone else's definition of a life well lived. But pain burns away that pretense. It makes the cost of inauthenticity too high to bear anymore. Because you've already lost everything once you've already fallen apart, already faced the void, already survived what you thought would destroy you. What's left to fear? This is the gift of having been broken. You become less breakable. Not because you're harder, but because you're more flexible. You know now that you can bend without shattering. That you can lose and still have yourself. That the only thing you truly can't afford to lose is your integrity. The ripple effect. Here's what happens when you live from this place. You give others permission to do the same. Your authenticity creates a field of permission around you. People in your presence feel safer being real. The masks come off. The performances stop. Conversations go deeper, faster, because you're not hiding, and so others don't have to either. This is how transformation spreads. Not through preaching or trying to convince anyone of anything, but through embodiment. Through being so fully yourself that others remember they have permission to be themselves too. You become a reminder of what's possible. Not a perfect person. Perfection is still a performance, but a whole person. Someone who's been through something and came out more human. Not less. Someone who carries their scars without shame. Someone who's learned to love their life, not despite its difficulties, but including them. Practical reflection. So what does this mean for you right now today? It means you can stop waiting. Stop waiting to feel healed enough, evolved enough, together enough to start living authentically. Stop waiting for someone to give you permission to be who you actually are. It means you can practice one small act of honesty today. One moment where you say what's true instead of what's easy. One choice that aligns with your values, even if it's uncomfortable. It means you can sit with your pain for just 5 minutes without distracting yourself. Feel it. Breathe into it. See what it has to teach you. It means you can look at your life and ask, what am I doing out of authentic desire? And what am I doing out of fear or obligation or the need for approval? And then gently, without judgment, begin shifting the balance. Emotional closing. The pain that has shaped your soul is not your enemy. It never was. It's the chisel that carved away everything false. The fire that burned through everything that wasn't essentially you. The teacher that refused to let you stay asleep. You didn't choose it. You probably wouldn't choose it again, but it chose you. And in enduring it, in feeling it fully, in letting it transform you instead of destroying you, you've become something rare and beautiful, a person who knows who they are, not because someone told you, but because you've been tested, broken, remade. And that person, the one you are now, on the other side of all that pain, is exactly who you were always meant to become. The wound was never the end of your story. It was the beginning.